So thanks so much for joining me. If you'd like to use the chat box at any stage during the webinar to ask a question, feel free, and I'll try and address it either at the time or at the end if I miss it at the time. So first up, I'll just like to introduce myself. My name's Stephanie Dowdell and I work for the BEST Network as a project manager. So I've been with BEST since 2013 and have been involved in setting up the image bank. So creating the collaborative activities and all other Slice annotation activities is something that I've been working with for quite a while now. So today we're looking at creating live classroom activities using the Slice Annotate tool. So why would we run collaborative activities using Slice? Firstly, Slice, when it was first made, was created just as a tool for creating personalized notes on images. So everything you do on Slice is private until you choose to share it. With the collaborative annotation tool, you gain for the first time insight into the students' understanding on their annotations on images. We can use this therefore to provide real-time feedback to learners, and it allows students to work in groups to receive peer feedback. So the flexibility of the tool allows us to either give the students the ability to view each other's annotations as they're made, or to look as though they're annotating individually. So we'll go through a couple of examples now to see how these activities can be set up and how the settings change the way the students view the activity. So the first activity I'm looking at today is one that was run on as part of a lecture, and our academic, you can see her lovely picture here, created an activity where the students were asked to put pins into regions of muscles that she's identified. So what you're looking at here is an overview of an activity layer and an answers layer. So this is how we provided feedback to students. So the students are the pins and the answers are these polygon regions. So first up, we're just going to jump into the answers layer. So you can see this consists of 3 annotations marking out each of the 3 muscles. So we were asking students to label particular muscles with particular coloured pins. So the polygons relate to the colours of the pins. So there's only one member on this layer, only the layer owner, the academic, can see this layer. I'm just going to click back now. And this time we're going to jump into the activity layer. So we actually ran 2 activities on this one individual image, marking out a couple of different muscles each time. So we're going to jump into this activity. You can see that it's set up exactly the same way as that answers layer was, but this time, as we move down that panel on the left, we've got our layer owner and when it was last edited, and you can see 173 plus our layer owner people were involved in this activity. So there were no annotations made by the layer owner. Important to note that anything you annotate on this layer will be visible to all of the students viewing the annotation layer. Down the bottom, we can see all of the other annotations made, which are all these colourful pins that we have here. And if I drop these out, they're all organised in alphabetical order, moving down this list here. So we asked the students to give their pins a title with the name of the muscle, as well as adhering to these colours that are actually randomly generated by the system when people annotate. So they do need to pick a colour for their annotation so that it matches up with this. And the reason for that duplication is they could have just used the colour or could have just given a name to the annotation, was just to help us quickly review these annotations. So you can see already that a cluster of red annotations appears over here, and there's a green cluster of pins around here, and then a cluster of the blue pins here. But we do have a smattering of other pins throughout this image, including a cluster here. So remember from our previous view that the correct answer for the red was over here. This cluster was something we could discuss in class as to why it was a common misconception for this particular infraspinatus muscle. So we can see a few different colors here as well, a nice gray one and a purple one. By asking students to put the pins with the names as well, we can see whether they were misidentifying that feature or whether it was just an accidental color choice. So we've got a red one here that we can't tell whether they were actually intending for that to be the infraspinatus or accidentally chose the color wrong for the green pin. So that's why we try to get them to double up with those options. To jump over into my own personal account now to look at the same image, you can see that I, as a student member of this layer, can only see my individual annotations. So I've marked up those 3 regions that have been requested as part of that activity. So if we jump back into the layer, we can have a look at the settings to see how this activity has actually been set up. So I'm going to click this drop down arrow next to the title and click edit. This brings up how the activity was set up. So we've got our title, our description, and as I scroll down this panel, we can see the viewer settings and the member settings, which are important for creating these collaborative activities. So the first option is to determine whether you want your members to see each other's annotations. This is checked off. So when I'm on my own personal account, I can't see any of these extra annotations, and members are all anonymous. So they're showing up as one long list of annotations, and you'll see what it looks like in another activity where they are not anonymous. So we'll click done and jump over to our second example. So what we're looking at here is also an activity that ran as part of a lecture. It's set up exactly the same way. So we've got a title, an activity description. So these students were asked to work in small groups inside their lecture. And the students again cannot see each other's annotations. And we can see this by jumping over to my account again. I'm logged in up at the top and I can only see my annotations that I made on this layer. So something we've got here, the layer owner has 5 annotations made, and these are actually all visible to the students. So if I am in my own account, I've just hidden these annotations for the time being, but I can just as easily see all of the ones that were provided by the academic. For this activity though, these were not shown during the activity. We set up, just as the previous example did, an answers layer where the answers were sitting on a separate annotation layer. They were painstakingly redrawn onto this image to make it easier to share the correct answers with the students and also to share this activity as a whole for examples like these. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these annotations for the time being. What you will see was we, as part of our instructions, asked students to make sure this green correct field of view square was located completely in view. So when they loaded the activity, just zoomed in a little bit too far, the layer looked something like this. So the green box was out of view. I'm looking in Firefox for this example, but if you viewed that same view in Chrome, it would look slightly different. So we set up that green box just to show people where they were supposed to be annotating so they could get the feedback in the class. If I zoom right out, you will see that people have annotated outside of this region, even as far up as halfway up this image. What we're looking at here is an artery, and we were asking students to label the features of the different layers of an artery wall. So just as before, the students were using pins, which we encourage for these kinds of activities because polygons tend to overlap. So it's better if we use a polygon to represent the correct answers rather than allowing students to use the polygon tools. And it's very easy for them to just quickly drop a pin and choose the color. So I'm going to hide this green box now just so it doesn't get in our way, and show you that we had a whole bunch of these light blue pins located around the center. We then had our yellow pins focusing on this black line around the middle, just in from the edge. Most of the purple pins were clustering on this lighter pink area, which is the tunica media. Just scrolling up here, zoomed in a little bit too far. Just move back into view. And then our tunica adventitia, outer edge of the artery. So as I mentioned, we set up that green box, but it's worth noting that this invite button, which is how we invite people to join a layer, is automatically set up to react to the screen size and the location of the screen. So I'll just go ahead and click into this button here and load it as another tab, so you can see the long list of numbers and text that are all indicating the exact position of this image, so that students will be directed to the image, to this annotation layer, and then specifically to this activity and the zoom level. So it's a long string of text, and you might like to consider hiding that, hyperlinking another piece of text with the link, maybe either in an email or learning management system or through social media if you've got that option. So that's how we share and invite people to participate in layers, rather than just copying this link up here, which will just show them the layer itself, rather than inviting them to annotate. So we had the 424 students participating in this activity. So that was our second lecture-based activity. And you can see that we had access to all of the student annotations, even though the students couldn't see each other's. And we were able to give feedback based on these regions. So for example, some of these pins that were a little bit too far out of the region, we could give that feedback. So now jumping over to a different type of activity. What you're looking at here, first glance, looks quite messy, but we are looking at activities where students were separated into individual groups. These groups were about 4 or 5 students in size, though you can see from our list here that we had some layers that gained quite a few more members. And down here where there's 23 members, they were actually working individually, but they were working on a layer where the academic could see it. The rest of them were working as a group to collectively annotate a slide. And these groups were separated out by numbers and letters and were shared through our learning management system. So the students chose the group that they were working in and loaded a layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click layer 1B, and you'll see that suddenly it's not a mess anymore. We had 4 students who participated in this activity. Just load up his annotations as well. They had been given instructions to label the normal mucosa in green, the protruding tumour in yellow, and the invasive tumour in purple. So there were 4 students in this group, and it looks like they mainly worked in pairs, sitting around computers, so only 2 people did the main annotating. But their layers nearly perfectly align with each other. We did have a discrepancy in the purple annotations for this group, the invasive tumour. So this is something that they would have been able to discuss while sitting around a group table. So the students' annotations are all still visible by the layer owner, who is the academic in this example. Students' names are visible so they can see who has made each annotation. If I just go up and click the edit tool, we'll see that this time we've got members being allowed to see each other's annotations and that they are not anonymous. So they're building up this picture together as part of a group activity. When you've got the settings on as students' names appearing, you can see this toggle option appears, which wasn't there in the anonymous activities. Because everyone's organised based on their own individual annotations, we can toggle the focus to highlight one person's annotations on an image at a time. So this tool could be used for marking. For example, if you'd asked a lot of students to annotate something, they could then be receiving marks based on their responses, though this would all be marked by hand. If you wanted something that was marked automatically, you transfer this activity to a Smart Sparrow activity, which we've got some help resources for as well. So that's all to show you on this student activity. And my final activity to show you is a layer that's been created by a student. So in this type of activity, we had a practical class where the academics were talking their students through the particular features, in this case on a liver slide. And students were all working together to mark out features. So I'll just close up all these annotations, but they've got 10, 9, 1 and 8 annotations respectively, and they were marking up the features that they were pointed out during their practical class to build up a picture collectively on this image. So they can all see each other's annotations and work to mark it up. However, it's worth noting that this layer has been shared with me. The academics don't tend to have visibility over these types of activities. So unless you ask your students to share as part of a Google Doc or through maybe a discussion board on Blackboard or Moodle, then you won't have any visibility about what your students are understanding. However, you are facilitating them working in groups. So now that we've viewed a couple of examples, I'm going to set up a collaborative activity we can do together now as part of our webinar. I'm now on an image of a fetal embryonic rat. I think it's a fetal rat, and the rat's been sliced vertically through its body, so we can see all of the body structures and how they fit together inside the little rat. The first step to make a collaborative activity is to click the Add Layer button. And we'll be annotating as normally at the start. So we'll give this a name, so group activity or webinar. So I've told my group members what we're looking at, and I've asked everyone to work together to mark out some of these body structures. So we're going to look at putting a blue pin in the brain, a red pin in the heart, for example, and continuing on. So I have already created an answers layer, which I'll go through and show you before I share this, but I might also just add to give your annotations a title. As we've already discussed, that's helpful. So as I scroll down, I set up the settings for this layer, and you can change these at any time. So halfway through an activity, you can suddenly reveal all the students' answers to each other. For the time being, we'll keep them individual, and we'll make everyone anonymous. And we'll come back halfway through and change those settings so that we can play around with it a little bit more. So I'll click Done. I make sure the image is set to the exact zoom level and location that I want it to be, and I click the Invite button. So now I've got to open up my chat in a moment, but I've got that saved, and I'll just click back and show you that I do have an answers layer prepared already. So we can see these areas have been marked out, and I'm keeping this as a separate layer because then I can reuse it for multiple activities. So if you're thinking about running the same activity in your class year after year, you're going to want to keep the answers on a separate layer, because even though you can duplicate any group activity you've created in the past, all of the student annotations will come along with that. So you'll want to keep a separate copy of any activities that you want to run multiple times, and in particular answers layers, because they're the hardest to set up, especially if you're going around very minute areas, as I did in the in this activity with the correct answers being revealed on this individual layer. So if we zoom right in, we can see how difficult it was to trace around this tiny black line that was in this image. We'll just jump back to here now and go to our activity. So I'll stop my share for a moment and chat chat a link to everyone. So it's quite a long link here. And if you'd like to follow that, if you've got your own Slice account, then log in with that. You'll be prompted to log in when you follow the link. But we've also got an account that you can use if you don't have your own. So I'll just pop that in the message as well. All right, so we're all in the activity now. And even though I'm the layer owner, I'll make an annotation. So if you haven't annotated as part of a class project before, or as one of another activity, to annotate, when we're inside a layer, we click the annotate button. I'll give this one a name. Let's do the brain first. And I drop a pin by clicking the pin and dragging that onto where I want to choose this feature to be located. So this just follows me around the screen until I click. And you can continue putting pins, or let's say if we draw a circle, I'm just clicking that tool and stretching it out to the size that I want. And I can resize that by adjusting the edges of that shape. So I'll delete the circle for the time being. And just to show you this drawing tool, which is how I have done the correct answers, I click the draw tool, come over to my image, and crosshairs are following me around. I click once to start drawing a line, and then I continue clicking to create a more and more complicated shape. And I'm just traveling around the brain in this area. So if you're not familiar with these structures, just pop your pins anywhere. It's just as an example today. So I double clicked to finish that shape, and you can see that all three of these annotations are all showing up as red. And when I had my instructions before, the brain was supposed to be blue. So I can click the paint tin tool over on the left and change that color so they're blue. And all of these annotations will come up under the one color with the one title. So if we wanted to make another annotation to come back and do the heart, we need to click done, go back, and annotate again. So then we would do the heart. So because I've made the annotations as the layer owner, you should see them appearing on your own account as well. So we have someone else who's attempted to do the brain. So if anyone else is interested, pop a couple of pins in. I can do another one. We'll just annotate. We'll drop a pin into the heart. Change the color. And the students are typically doing this as creating personal activities as well as they're speaking through these slides as part of class activities. So they're quite quick at doing it, popping a title in, popping a pin in, and clicking done. Now we've got a total of 4 annotations. Fantastic. Got some test ones. I don't know what that one area is either. Some muscle in the neck. And every time I refresh or the screen reloads because I've made another annotation, this appears on the main screen. So when we're running these activities in classes, we tend to keep the screen completely blank, leaving only the instructions up the top, and all annotations would be hidden so that none of the information can sway other students. So they've also got a reference to what the correct colours and areas that they needed to label were. So we've got a handful of annotations now. So I'm going to go up and click the edit tool now. And now we'll allow members to see each other's annotations and also take it off anonymous. And the activity will update now. So we can see our disease museum friend has labeled 4 of the annotations, and Danielle has done a great test for us as well. Fantastic. So as before, we can use the toggle focus tool to just draw attention to one person's annotations. So now that we've got these, let's see the correct answers. So to do that, we click back. And hundreds of annotations appear now, of course. I'm just going to go ahead and hide the other ones that aren't relevant to today's activity. So we've got our webinar view and our answers view. And we can see that the colored pins are falling in the right region for the activity. So the correct pin colors are in the right regions for these activities. So we can give very fast feedback to students and also even share the correct answers layer with them afterwards by simply sharing the URL at the top of the image here. So they could then come in and view the answer or even take a copy of it themselves by clicking duplicate. So they've got the answers in their accounts to review just as we have, using that back button to view multiple layers at a time. So you can turn on and off these other layers as you choose. So if you do end up having the same activity run over multiple years, you are able to just show what you need to show for that particular set of students. So that's about all from me. That's I can take you to our Best Network YouTube channel. So this, I'll be sharing a link to our channel in our follow-up email, probably early next week, along with a recording for today's webinar. And in our YouTube channel, we share some help videos for not only Slice, but also the Smart Sparrow functionality. And as I scroll down halfway through the list, we do have a video on creating collaborative annotation activities in Slice. So if I click that, we won't play it now, but it runs through setting up the activity. It only goes for 1:50 seconds, so very short, but speaks through setting up all of the individual settings for the annotations. Also, you'll get my email when I send it through to you if you've got any questions with setting up these activities yourself, or if you'd like to create one and then share it with me. I'm happy to go through and pretend to be a student on your activity so you can see how it looks. And I've got a couple of different accounts that I can use them with, including one of the ones that I shared with you today. So you'll see how a couple of students interact with that activity. That option is always there for you. If you've got any other questions as well about anything the network has, feel free to drop me a line. So I'll stop sharing now, and if you've got any questions, I'll be around to answer them. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope you found it somewhat helpful.